Circles and circles and circles.
And
here we go. Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks so much, and sorry for the sort of technical delays that we've had today. Welcome to our third Summit Speaker Series event, and welcome to the very first event that we're going to have with Mindshift. Really excited today to have three fantastic people who are, nicer than me, smarter than me, better dressed than me, but I'll try my best to match up here. Introducing you to Aaron McCluskey. We'll talk a little bit more about Aaron's background. Kevin Gamble, and back by popular demand, Max is yourself today. And Max, you were great to join us a few weeks ago. We talked about successes and failures within small business. And myself, Ryan Anderson, and I direct the Center for Entrepreneurship here at Mohawk College. So let's get started, everybody. The topic today is to really talk about marketing and branding your business. And it's interesting in speaking with one of our team members, Natalie Reed. I've got a business background, a leadership background, but I don't know a darn thing about this side. So I'm really happy that I brought our experts together. I'm excited to learn as much as everybody else is right now on these topics. So some of the things that I'm looking forward to speaking about today, really talking a lot about where we go wrong, where do we go right, really utilize some of the expertise that we've got here to make sure that we're in good shape. A couple points that I wanted to bring up, and as a business owner in my past life and a business leader, I learned the hard way. My very first business, I remember a newspaper salesperson came to talk to me, Kevin, and he said, you got to advertise. And I said, how can I advertise? I've got no money. And he says, well, you have to advertise. And I said, okay, fine, I'll plop an ad. And I waited for the ad. It was, Aaron was in the Ancaster News. And I waited for the ad to show, and I waited for it to go, and no one called. And so I got angry at the advertiser and said, well, it doesn't work. I learned then about frequency. And number one, I learned about having a plan, and that you really have to have a marketing plan and sort of know what works and know where things go. Number two, build a community. Max, I'm going to really lean on you with this right now, and to build a community and build that following that we have. Kevin IKEA is a great example of that, isn't it? Where they've really built that sort of solid community of buyers and supporters. Number three, focus on you. I often will say that you are your best and worst salesperson as an entrepreneur. Aaron, you would know this in your background, that when you're out there, you're representing yourself, but really you are your brand and you are your company too. So I'm looking forward to talking about that. Highlight quality and experience. And the last but not least, what gets measured gets done. I was just on the phone with a man named Sam Mercanti, who's one of the most successful Hamilton business owners that we've ever had. And that was always his notion to me. If you're not keeping score, if you're not measuring how you're doing with a plan, then you're not going to be successful. Last but not least, 5 mistakes: not having a plan, also not having a budget set aside. I'm really interested in our panel today to talk about that. And understanding word of mouth impact. Max, when we last spoke, you mentioned guerrilla marketing 100 times, and I kept writing it down. Yeah. I want to talk about that. I'm looking forward to hearing what you think about that. Being scared of risk and change. The center right now is doing a lot of work on digitizing businesses. COVID's taught us right now that we have to have a second mode of doing business right now if you're a small business, e-commerce. A lot of stores are afraid of that and social media because they lack the expertise, and really talking about that risk. And last but not least, as I've said here, a lack of digital presence. So without further ado, I want to turn this over to the experts that we have on this, and I can't wait to introduce all of you. I'll start with Max. Max is the founder of True Hamiltonian. You'll know Max from the True Hamiltonian brand that's all over the place, the pop-up stores that we've got, the branding that Max has done on his own, and also the best and worst game announcer at the TICAT games. I say you're the best, Max, because you're entertaining. I say you're the worst because you're in our season tickets yelling all the time in the back of my ear. But other than that, we're really good. So, and next is Kevin Gamble. Kevin and I go way back. Long before he had the gray hair in his beard, here I see he has now. That makes me excited because it matches mine. Kevin has worn many hats. I can't wait to hear about the your trademark name. I'm going to leave that to you to talk about. Kevin presently right now is an ophthalmologist. There, I said it to you, but he is the digital portfolio and development manager at IKEA Canada, and it's IKEA has done an extremely great job during COVID, by the way, as well, Kevin, at maintaining a presence and at making sure that they're prominent at a time when many brick and mortar businesses have sort of kind of gone under hiding in many ways. I've been very impressed with that. And last but really not least is Aaron McCluskey. So Aaron is the partner and creative director of the Laundry Design Works and co-founder of what I think is the coolest new venture I've heard in a long time, called the Laundry Rooms. Aaron, I wish you would have launched this a long time ago when I was doing a lot of traveling, and I can't wait for you to sort of talk about this a little bit as well. So, so without further ado, let's get started. We really have structured the Summit Speaker Series to be speaker-oriented, panel-oriented, really making sure that we give the experts the opportunity to talk. I will sort of structure these questions, ask them. I ask anyone to jump in of our panelists. And what I will do is I will be taking questions throughout the course of our speaker series event, and I'll ask them towards the end. So we'll jump in right away. First question, Kevin, I'll let you take a crack at this one first, and then Aaron, Max, jump in whenever you can. Over the last few years, consumers have been made more aware of the ways brands interact with them, whether through social influence or social media analytics. They strategically target customers. How have you, or in this case IKEA, adapted to changing consumer perception on marketing and advertising?
First of all, hi. Thanks for having me. It's great to be here. You talk a lot, Ryan, so I didn't want to interrupt you, so we'll just start there. Hi, everybody else.
It's going to be a lot of fun. Kevin and I go way back in our athletic background, too, so this might get ugly, but go for it.
You might want, this will be good, yeah. So
I bet.
To the question, listening to customers. That sounds very much pie in the sky, but as you alluded to and kind of stole my thunder a minute ago, IKEA Canada has done really well with our digital presence during COVID. I said to Aaron before we started the panel, it's almost been a year to the day since we shut down our stores, and listening to our customers, things like launching self-serve portal tools, so having the ability to cancel your order online, to reschedule it online, to give you a full purchase order history. A year ago, we didn't have that. Trying new things, listening to them as to what our consumers want, what our customers want. We are currently in progress with subscription boxes in Vancouver. So things like, hey, it'd be great if I could get my home furnishings and all the stuff that IKEA sells in a box delivered to my house. It's actually a really good idea. We should try that. So right now we have a pilot in Vancouver where we have done exactly what our customers have asked out west, just as a proof of concept. And if this works like we think it's going to, then eventually we'll roll it out nationwide. But listening to our customers has been our biggest learning over the last year or so, and really adjusting to what circumstances have given us. A year ago, our remote planning at IKEA Canada was minimal, and now we were in my notes that I have here, I have written IKEA was less than ideally prepared when COVID hit, and that's putting it mildly, to offer our customers ways to remotely plan. And now we have something in place that has a huge ROI for us. It's nearly 3,600% ROI on what we've invested. So with all of this, it comes back to listening to our customers, especially in the last year or so, what they've wanted, where they've wanted to meet us, and how they've wanted to meet us, and then giving them that option, whether it's on our websites or through social media or any other touch point that we have with our customers, listening to them and then providing those options to them.
Interesting. You mentioned listening to them, and Aaron, I'll sort of give you a platform right now to talk about your new venture. I mean, you've really listened and you've observed and identified a customer need too, haven't you?
Yeah, definitely, Ryan. Hi, everybody. It's good to be here. Kevin, that's so interesting to hear what you have to say. So I guess just a bit of background on The Laundry. So we're a creative studio that helps people, marketing managers execute some of these visions. So it's really interesting, just as you're saying, listening to consumer, we're very much having to listen to, marketing managers in a way that we never have before. And I think listening to them is important. I think overall, this new generation of consumers just doesn't trust traditional forms of advertising. They're social animals, and they vote with their peers, and they trust what their peers have to say. So, from our perspective, influencer marketing plays a huge role in the way we kind of market our ideas and our products. And in terms of, developing new creative ideas, we're seeing a shift in the way we design. So more often than not, in the past, we would design one very large piece of creative that might run in a newspaper, and it was very blanketed. But today, with digital, we can develop multiple pieces of creative that are geared towards whatever specific demographic we're targeting in particular. So, if we design a concept or an ad for someone between the ages of 40 and 50, we have the capabilities now for it to look quite visually different than an ad that we would have created for a group of teenagers. So the way we kind of target consumers is much more intimate and direct. And this is exactly, kind of listening to the shift in the way people want to travel and behave kind of led to the idea for the laundry rooms and started that whole concept up.
Interesting. You mentioned something here, striking a balance, and already we've got a question that have come in. And I think what I'll do is usually I'll wait till the end, and I'll take advantage of it right now. How do you strike a balance between marketing within age groups and demographics? What is your goal between, Kevin, my first IKEA experience was shopping for residence furniture when I was younger, and now it's taking our daughter who's looking for her furniture in her room, and so it's really changed. How does a company or a entrepreneur really cater to both sides of that, both a generation that might just want to be consumed via social media and a generation that might really struggle to go and adapt to that?
I'll jump in.
You want to say that, Kevin? I'm happy to.
I'll beat everybody too. I'll make this quick, and then everybody else can jump in. From IKEA's point of view, it's very much having a consistent voice across all those platforms. IKEA is very well known for having a very specific tone approach to our customers, however you want to phrase that, and implementing that across our app, across social media channels, across our store, and having that voice be shown in all of those touch points.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think to add to that, the new mediums to kind of get that message out there today are changing. You don't necessarily, as I mentioned, have to run one television commercial or one ad. You can use that same amount of allocated budget and very specifically target a couple of different groups. So you actually do have the opportunity now to share that message slightly differently. And by message, I don't mean, break consumers with brands, but kind of use slightly different messages that might resonate a little more with specific target consumers.
I think that I'll add one point, and then I want to go to the second question. I think that, Aaron, you would say is the importance of actually having a program and really taking a look at different versions of marketing and different avenues to make sure you hit those things too. Then, correct? Okay.
Absolutely.
So let's move on to the second question. And Max, I'm going to throw this right to you. And we'll come into a discussion in a sec. What is the best marketing strategy you've ever implemented? Why? How did you think of it? How did you come up with it? And why did it work so well?
For us, I think the best marketing strategy we ever implemented was basically kind of like a rebel type thing where we tried to make the brand seem like it was something you're not supposed to have. It's almost like an outsider type thing. And I feel like whenever you appeal to people's sense of feeling like they're being excluded, then they want to be a part of it. So I think for us, that's basically what we did. We just kind of like pitched our entire marketing on being the rebels, the outsiders.
So does that mean I'm like really cool because I've got a bunch of your stuff, or does that mean I'm not? I'm not really sure which one that is, but I'll turn that over to you, man. That's good. Kevin, how about you? You've got obviously a varied background. What can you think of as far as the best strategy that you've either uncovered that you've executed?
I was going to answer your "Am I cool?" question. Do we have time for that? Or should I?
You just did. You're not. Go ahead.
I'll do this. It's gonna be fun. Honestly, adding sustainability to our site, and I will explain what this is in a second. The messaging to our site, to our app, to our single speaking voice, I think is my favorite strategy, and I will explain why. One of my favorite stats that I heard a year ago was that Canadian consumers respond, whatever the number was, let's say 30% better. They have a 30% bigger spend when companies have their sustainability messaging forward and right in front of them. So I think highlighting that very much from a people and planet positive that we focus on, and knowing that that'll actually attract customers is kind of a win-win for everybody. That's my personal favorites, is the sustainability messaging that we do. And with that in mind, and here, you know what, I'll be the uncool one for a second, Ryan. MasterChef Canada, if anybody watches MasterChef, and I'm a huge Food Network nerd, so I'll just own that for a second. MasterChef Canada this coming year is actually sponsored by IKEA. And we have our sustainable pantry on MasterChef Canada. And I'm all in for the sustainability messaging. So I am a huge fan of what we're doing with Master. I didn't even know MasterChef was happening until a week ago. So I'm actually really excited that this got postponed a week so I can talk about it.
Nice.
That's my favorite messaging, is us being front and center on all our platforms with, hey, here's our sustainability. Here's what we as a huge multinational corporation are doing. So, I mean, it's just sticking to our values. And that's why I think that's probably my favorite right now.
You know, Kevin, it's interesting. You know, you mentioned sustainability. I was reading an article the other day about how sustainability is actually being marketed, and are you using it as a ploy? Are you using it as something to sort of attract people? And one of the things that they said is that the best companies are the ones that actually use that up front, and they don't tell you about it. They show you. And they don't go and say that, you know, that we care. They show you in everything they do. And that's, you know, when I mentioned building a community, I know I've learned as an entrepreneur and a business leader, you have to do that, but you have to carry through with it. You can't. It's one thing to say it; it's another thing to have that as part of your company. And that's something that I really take a lot of stock in what you just said about that. The fact that that's something that'll be at your core, not so much being thrust upon people.
Exactly.
Aaron, you know, over to you on this, and it's interesting because, you know, a lot of the work that the Laundry does is visual. It's building, it's revamping. It's, you know, I always be so proud when I would fly into the Hamilton Airport and I saw all of your work. You know, that's cool. And you know, you've done a lot of marketing, a lot of different visual examples of what you've done. What would you say the best one was? What was the big impact, and why did it go so well?
Well, I would say, you know, if we think in terms of marketing strategies, I guess the best strategy that we kind of employ would be storytelling, I guess, because I think it's just such a powerful way in which to connect brands to audiences. You know, it's something that we're really familiar with from a young age. Our parents read us stories, they transport us to faraway places, you know, they engage our imaginations at a very emotional level. And I believe it's that kind of, you know, emotional connection that really builds a loyal following with the brand, rather than just, you know, skewing figures or having pretty visuals. It's a backstory, I think, that really lets us weave, you know, this kind of memorable tale of a product or a brand or a space, what the product or company does, how it solves problems, what it's. That's easier remembered when you kind of weave it as a larger narrative. And I think today people are kind of craving these sort of authentic emotional connections in a world that's becoming highly digitized. And, you know, I think that's one of the reasons why IKEA is so successful, because they always, you know, whether it's a message of sustainability or whatnot, they're always kind of weaving it into a larger narrative of how, you know, it affects their brand, as opposed to just putting a picture of someone recycling on their media.
You know, it's Aaron. It's interesting. You know, we've got an advertising class, and I think some of them are here, or I know they'll be joining us in Mindshift, and they're actually doing some work for the center right now. And one of the things that I was really impressed with, and they've really, you know, as the you know, the leader of the center, or, you know, in my old life as a business leader, business owner, I needed to be convinced by a marketing team that something could work. And how that was done was actually by putting myself, people I care about, in those shoes. And one of the things that I really enjoyed about their presentations is they actually would say, meet David or meet Sarah. Sarah is ... And what it really let me do as a person, I guess you could say, buying that media, is it let me go and say, yeah, that's where Sarah can get benefited, or yeah, that's where Tom can be placed within the center. And it painted a picture for me that, as the, you know, the non-creative business numbers guy, that's the one. And so as a result, then I could sort of buy into that. And it's something that I really appreciated about what the students have done. And every single group did it fantastically. And they were all different too. They all presented a different human being to me, which I really liked a lot. And so I listen to what you're saying, and I think about that, because as I traveled through that airport, I did see my parents sending me off when I was 13 to a ball tournament or whatever it was. And that's something that you really sort of take stock in. Or that bourbon one that I talked to you about, because I like a glass of bourbon. I really like that one, by the way, too. So, but no, I really like that you said that. I really did. And I think, being able to put someone in a marketing campaign, Kevin, IKEA does it obviously extremely well. And Max, in all seriousness, I see now that approach, that rebel sort of thing, to go and say, yeah, I can be something I might not be or might want to be with that clothing brand. And that's something that clothing brands have always done extremely well too, haven't they? Interesting. Next question, and Max, I'll start with you again. What creates a strong brand? How do you communicate your brand's personality? And that's really dovetails really well into the first one, doesn't it?
I think what creates a strong brand is the identity. You have to know exactly what you're trying to communicate to people. When they look at your brand or when they see your stuff, you have to know exactly what you're trying to get across to them. For my brand, it's an extension of my personality. So if I'm going to live or die, whether being successful or not successful, I'd rather do it knowing that this is what I believe in, rather than taking advice from someone else that I may not 100% believe in. So if you're going to live or die by the sword, it might as well be your sword.
I love that. And you live and breathe the extension of your personality, because the brand is very much active, energetic in a lot of ways as well, right? Would you say that, Max, that's a risk to kind of go that way and sort of go, off the chart, not so much have an actual plan, but really sort of be ad lib and proactive, if you will?
No, there is a plan, but the plan is basically designed around what you want and what you feel are the priorities. Or a nice way of saying it is, the entire plan for our brand is to communicate how I feel a brand should be, what it should look like, how it should resonate. So it's all the ideas in my head being communicated to a wider community.
No, so I'm going to ask you for a sec to take a minute then, because I think it'd be a great opportunity to explain to the group that are out there that, how did you found this brand? Because I love the story. So tell me the why. I love this story. And it's a great time to go and have you tell it to us.
Okay, so basically, I was doing a lot of acting in Toronto at the time, and I would literally go to Toronto for auditions, and I would sit in a room, and there would be like 100 people waiting to audition, and they'd all start talking about where they're from, what they do, and they would ask me where I'm from, and I'd say I'm from Hamilton, and they'd be like, "Oh, why would you live there?" And I'm an extremely proud Hamiltonian. So I remember coming home and saying, you know what, I'm going to get a shirt that says, "I love Hamilton," and wear it every single time I go to Toronto or anywhere else. And that's how this whole thing started, was just me wanting to wear my pride on my chest. But a buddy of mine who is an actual graphic designer and all that, he said, "I love Hamilton," or "I Heart Hamilton" is a ripoff of I Heart New York. He's like, "Dude, you're a smart guy. Come up with your own idea. Come up with your own branding." And I basically came up with Hamilton is Home. And every time I wore that shirt anywhere, people would ask me where they could get one. And that's basically how this whole thing got started.
Kevin, I think you and I would have wished to have had those shirts on the GO train during those trips in the morning, right? To go and say we're really true Hamiltonians, huh?
Yeah.
Been a lot of fun.
Yeah. So two things. One, Max, I'll be at your store at some point this week. Two, as somebody who grew up in Hamilton, I completely get "Oh, you're from Hamilton. Oh, really?"
Oh man, they were disgusted. Yeah. They were like, "Why would you live there?"
Yeah.
And Max, you're not a Hamilton native either, are you?
I'm originally from Fort Lauderdale, Florida.
Oh, Fort Lauderdale. Sorry.
I know. It's disgusting.
But it does really speak though to building that community. And in all kidding aside, I mean, the true Hamiltonian brand. I remember when it was actually came out and walking walking downtown where your store was, right actually Aaron by the laundry, and looking at it and going and saying that's kind of cool. I live here, Kevin. I love the city. I got to have one of those. And that really was the way that went, is sort of taking advantage of a brand that went with the affinity that someone has to something. And I remember reading an article, Max, about the I Love New York movement that they had at that time. That was because of some of the crime and some of the things that were going on at New York, because no one wanted to go there. And so the government went and launched that program and said, I love New York. Everyone thought it was a cool shirt. And then years later, everyone has one in their closet. And it's kind of neat when you take that affinity to something and you build a brand around it as well, which I think is kind of cool too. So, Aaron, I'll turn this over to you. Your brand's personality. Can you talk to us a little more about what that is, and where did that sort of come from, and how did it get developed?
Yeah, well, the name comes from an interesting, I guess, niche that we have in the apparel industry. So we actually are a full clothing design and manufacturing agency, as well as a creative agency. So we didn't want to kind of, lose that into just the regular graphic design and marketing. So the word "the laundry" comes from our tie to the apparel industry a little bit. But it's interesting talking about brand personality, because I think personally that is the most important thing. That's why I'm such a big fan of Max's brand. I think it just oozes personality, and it's just such a joy to kind of watch it grow. And it's interesting because as a company that communicates the personality of many different brands for a living, it's kind of my job to get into a client's shoes, understand their personality, and regurgitate it. It can be hard to kind of turn the lens back on yourself a little bit and try and understand, after a day of putting yourself in everyone else's shoes, what your own personality is. And so we really, as a studio, try and set some time aside every year to just express ourselves creatively. We travel when we can. We haven't done that recently, but those trips are really geared around kind of understanding our own brand and where we sit in kind of the global market, if you will, in our positioning. And I think that's really important, is to kind of constantly reevaluate where you're sitting in the space, and make sure you kind of take some time out to really do those things that make you who you are creatively as a brand. So yeah, one of the things we do is we do kind of team photo shoots twice a year, where we actually put ourselves in front of the lens as opposed to behind it. And that kind of really just helps us understand when we see someone else, take the reins and do some creative things, because personality is everything. And I think if your brand doesn't have it, that's when it starts to go downhill.
Yeah.
That's been a challenge too, because you've really worked to diversify your business as well, between the clothing brand, the designs that you're doing that are on-site designs, and now obviously your new, I'll let you sort of tell the group about it, but your new, sort of laundry on-site sort of thing within your condos and some of the stuff. I mean, you're a great example of diversifying all over the place, but yet also having that common theme too, which is hard too, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. It's really tricky. So the laundry rooms is kind of an idea that was born from our love of travel. We travel all around the world, and we weren't finding some of those affordable kind of cool places to stay that were tied to a larger story, if you will. Airbnb was awesome, but it's a little segregated, and I don't want to say disconnected, but it's just, one person's home. So the laundry rooms is, designed by creatives for creatives. And when you stay at these rooms, you tap into the creative community within any particular given city. So you're not just staying in a city, but you also make connections with the people there and start to talk to some of the creative people within that industry. Because, I think to Max's point, if your brand isn't authentically who you are and what you feel is missing in the world, then that transparency is going to be harder and harder to maintain moving forward.
It's interesting, and I've been very impressed by how you can be so diverse but yet so consistent at the same time, and that's a challenge, but it's also something that I think any good business does. And I think the other thing too that you mentioned, the three of you are very creative and very energetic people, but yet you work in a space that actually has you running or in Kevin's case, managing a business. And I think sometimes it's a challenge, isn't it, to maintain that sort of creative side when you're in the middle of actually running a business. And that's something that I know, sometimes even in my background, being more of a leadership development guy, it's tough to develop people when you're worried about dollars and cents. And it's tough to develop what you're really good at when you're worried about the business operating too. And Max, you can probably identify with that during this COVID time too, couldn't you?
Absolutely, I do. What's the magic word? The government keeps saying pivot. You have to pivot.
Mhm.
So
sorry, Max. I think when this is all done, the two words I never want to hear are pivot and agile because
okay.
no one cared about that before COVID, and no one's going to care about it afterwards. So I couldn't agree with you more.
What do you have against agile?
Well, because maybe you're not. I don't know, Kevin. But I think I just think that before COVID, Max, a lot of businesses just sort of kept going on sort of thing as they were. And this is, I know you and I have talked about the fact that this is sort of, put a shock in the system, hasn't it?
It's an absolute wake-up call. And there's so many businesses that weren't online before, and now they're all scrambling to get online. They weren't advertising before. Now they're all finding ways to use their social media or use local influencers to get the word out that, hey, we're here, we're open, you can still shop with us. So I think it has been a wake-up call for a lot of businesses.
Hey, Kevin, would you say too with that, and I think, because you've got more of a structured brand, would you say that's dangerous though? Because if you've got to be more reactive as a business that maybe that didn't have an online presence, and now you've got to do it without the expertise or without a plan or without a program, are you not almost taking two steps backward to go forward in a way?
Yeah, and this is where being proactive comes, it pays dividends, right? And to Max's point, even to Aaron's point and to yours, about building that community and having that consistent personality-driven brand behind it, this is where it starts paying dividends. And I'm completely off script for IKEA, by the way. That's got thrown out the window. But I think to Max's point, because Max has built such a strong community brand way before all of this, yes, maybe he could have done better with his digital presence, but he has that community backing him to help him build a digital presence if he has to go down that road. Max, I have absolutely no idea what digital presence is, so please don't take that personally. But he has that strong brand, that strong voice behind him to build that. And I think being proactive in that sense and sticking to your brand, your values, all of the above will help you get through times like this where, to Max's point, everyone is scrambling and you're just kind of, well, I did the work like 2 years ago, so I think we're good. I mean, we'll have to pivot a few things, but it'll be fine.
And be agile. Yeah, I got that. It's funny, with the center, we're working with a lot of cities right now and their business development folks, Kevin, that are asking for help in how to actually digitize businesses. And there are difficult conversations right now because you're telling someone who might own a bakery or they may have owned something that was always a destination for someone to go and flip it online. And it's not that hard. They really almost are two different stores and two different businesses, aren't they? In that you've got the bricks and mortar and you've got the online. It's not just plopping your things on a website and selling them. It really is a different strategy, different product development and everything else though, isn't it?
Absolutely. And now I'm going to go back to my IKEA hat. It's funny that you bring that up because to my proactive statement a second ago, by absolute chance, a year ago, before everything shuts down, IKEA launches their brand new app. And for the first time, IKEA gives our customers the ability to buy within the app. Could not have timed that better if we had tried. Happy accident. And we saw a huge, obviously, spike in sales between e-commerce and the app because for the first time we gave our customers that option. And to the proactive part, I'm going back to the question now. The strong personality and strong brand. The app a year ago was very much our jumping off point to kind of not rebrand, but I guess reskin everything. So the app, if you go download the IKEA app, you'll notice that the app looks very much like the website now. And during all of this COVID time, we took what the app was, designs and skins and the aesthetic choices we made in the app and transported it to the website. So we had that strong brand connection across all of our touch points. So.
Kevin, that really speaks to the earlier conversation about appealing to different ages and demographics too, doesn't it? I mean, my mom is, Aaron, you remember my parents. My mom is the best person in the world that still will not go to an ATM because she still has to go to a bank teller, and she's I think she's still waiting for the slips to get filled out still. Trying to get her to shop online during COVID has been a lot of work, and she's doing well. She's doing well, but she will only go now to businesses that actually look like the website and look like the storefront that she knows. And there's that comfort level in a lot of ways. Meanwhile, we've got a 15 and a 13-year-old or 16 and 13-year-old at home. They won't go to a store to save their lives because they can hang out in the room and get the same things that their grandmother can. So it really is that company going and appealing to the exact same thing. And then, we talk about COVID being reactive, but the businesses who have done well, they weren't prepared for COVID because none of us could have been, but they had a presence that was adjustable and adaptable, I guess, because of that. So I think it's an interesting point. So let's move on to the last question. And Aaron, I'm going to start with you on this because you've done so much change and so much enhancing with what you've done. When do you know it's time to change? When do you know it's time to enhance something? Have you thought about doing that lately, or can you talk to us a little bit about when you looked at something and said, no, it's time to change, or even a client of yours going and saying, you know what, you got to make this change?
Yeah, I think that's such a good question. I think that as a studio, and I think probably, if you're creative, you're just always evaluating your current position in the market and questioning whether or not it's time for a change. And I think that's just the nature of our business a little bit, because I think things are moving faster nowadays. And I think we see, personal brands reinventing themselves every day, particularly in fast-paced industries, such as music, for example, with recording artists kind of changing or enhancing their brand with the release of any new album. It's always a slight kind of maybe shift in what their earlier image looked like. And I think it's a careful juggling act, really, between remaining consistent and pivoting, if there's a word, and pivoting with trends. And I think it's important to note that there are definitely ways to enhance or shift your brand without necessarily rebranding or changing your logo that has a lot of brand equity in it already. So, shifting brand imagery, photography, color palettes, all of those things can kind of subtly shift your brand positioning without, doing a full rebrand. And also diversifying. I think more and more we're starting to see collaborations and people busting into the industry. So, for example, there is a big trend in my industry, the creative industry, for design studios to try proof of concept, right? Which is what we're doing for Laundry Room. So, we spend all this time doing, creative strategies for clients, designing out spaces and products. More and more studios are actually trying that themselves. They're starting new restaurants, they're launching their own products, and in our case, we're launching essentially boutique hotels, so to say.
Aaron, I'm gonna ask you sort of a different question, because I think it's interesting for our group of students to think about. You've probably had some difficult conversations with clients about change too, haven't you? And when you've taken a look at encouraging a stiff business guy like me to take a chance on something that's new and inventive. And I think of what you did with the El Mocambo, and I think of what you did even with the Hamilton Airport. And have there been times when you've had to have a difficult conversation with a client about change and really convince them that this is the right way they have to go?
Every day, every day. And I mean, but I think it's hard because clients are so personally tied to their brand. Sometimes it can be hard for them to take a step back and look at it, quite objectively. And in my line of work on the creative side of things, often it's just a guttural instinct, that we're suggesting this kind of shift. And I think that's why more and more we're enjoying working with, digital marketing partners, because digital marketing just gives you such an interesting actual measurable. So, we talked about measurables and having plans. And, when we work with digital marketing, we can come back to the client with actual data that supports whether one type of creative worked over another type of, changing the industry completely, because in turn, marketing managers can go back to their business, partners and say, actually, just, an idea anymore. Now we can actually say that this change, attributed to this many more things.
I think we lost you for a sec there. And so I think the last part there was actually almost using numbers to go and convince someone that what you suggested to someone actually had a measurable impact. So, a metrics driven person like myself can look at that and go and say, okay, well, Aaron's idea met this much return on my investment. Therefore, it's an investment, not a cost. Because I know from the business side, I want to see what something is going to get me, and otherwise it's just a cost. It's not that investment. So I think it's a really interesting way of convincing someone to go and say, this is what you want to do. Change sucks. Change is hard, but with that will come this benefit. I think that's interesting. Really interesting. Kevin, I'm going to kind of go to you, and then Max, I'm interested in sort of wrapping up this segment with what you thought with your brand. But Kevin, is there a time when IKEA, or even your past life, when you've looked at something and gone and said it's time for a change? And with that, why did you feel that way, and what did you do to sort of do that? You're laughing, so I must have hit something.
Well, I'm laughing because I was hoping you were coming to me next, because you were talking about how change sucks, but if you have numbers behind it, to Aaron's point, it's a lot stronger of a case to say, hey, I know this sucks, but here's what we should be doing. I alluded to launching the app last year at this time last year. And I mean, it's hard to get smaller clients or like medium-sized businesses to change. Imagine trying to do it with a multinational corporation. It's like dragging a boat with a teapot. It's nuts. But we launched this app a year ago, and for the first time in IKEA's history, you could buy things on an app, which was mind-boggling that we didn't have that in the first place. But nonetheless, we launched it a year ago, and the old app, rightfully so, had 2.5 stars on every app store we could find. We launched this brand new app, and on every store, on the 3 major ones, it's 4 stars and above. And there's your base numbers, to Aaron's point. Hey, our customers don't like this app. We need to change it. Well, what are the benefits of that? Well, better e-commerce, better branding, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I almost said pivoting to what customers want to hear and what customers want. I mean, a shoppable app we launched a year ago, and it's super exciting. We timed it really well. But now, in hindsight, I don't know what took us so long. Our customers were saying, hey, we want to be able to do this. You guys need to help us out. So I think your original question, I guess, and to my original point, listening to your customers. I mean, if part of your brand is saying, we listen to you, then follow through on that. And in our very specific case, our customers were saying, hey, your app is not the greatest. You should probably look into that. So we did.
Mm-hmm. And it's amazing to think a multinational company like that would miss such an obvious message too, isn't it? And sometimes I'll say that because you probably don't want to, but sometimes the most obvious answer actually is underneath your nose in a lot of ways. And you can do a lot of research on multinational companies with horrible websites and horrible e-commerce presence and horrible customer service and horrible reviews, and you wonder why they stay in business in a lot of ways. But it's interesting you go and you'd say that. Max, sort of over to you on this, because the True Hamiltonian brand, as you said, it got its birth by guerrilla marketing and by on the back of your back, literally. When have you thought lately you want to change? When did you make that change? When's it time, and where are you presently at with that?
I'm a strong believer in, if it's not broken, don't fix it. So I'm never going to change the brand, but I strongly believe in enhancing and refreshing the brand. And I would love to give full credit to Aaron and the team over at the Laundry Media, because they have helped me in the past to freshen up designs, come up with colors that work. They've definitely helped me out in the past just to freshen up the brand. They're amazing over there.
So that's really interesting. Aaron, tell me about that conversation, because this is a really cool thing for us to talk about. I didn't know that, and I didn't do that by design. But Aaron, tell me about the conversation you had with Max, and was he easy to convince? Max, tell me how receptive you were, because this is a really cool thing to talk about.
It was actually Max's idea, not ours. Like, Max is one of those, I guess you call them dream clients, where he was open to creative ideas and he was open to collaboration, and it wasn't tricky. You know, I think we and correct me if I'm wrong, Max, but we all kind of, you know, chatted and said, okay, we don't want to change, you know, the core values of that brand, but let's just kind of try some slight variations that, you know, is something new and different and just kind of keeps it fresh in the minds of all of his fans, essentially.
You know, the funny part is all the variations they came up with were all amazing. So it made it really hard to choose just one.
Thanks.
So what did you settle on, Max? Can we ask?
Basically, we kept the original crossed hammer logo, and they kind of put a circle around it and added. That's the one thing they added that I wasn't sure about. They wanted to add my name to the logo, and I never wanted my name to be a part of it. But they convinced me that I was my brand. Your name needs to be on there, and they were absolutely right.
So that's interesting, Max. In all seriousness, you know, this session, the one before, one of the things that I've really loved about your brand is you, and the fact that people will identify the True Hamilton brand with who you are. And it's interesting, Aaron, that you would identify that and then actually utilize that now to Max's advantage as well. So I guess that's a great lesson for us to learn as far as this group goes and our attendees is, you know, take advantage of what you know works. And Max, for you, going with that, knowing you as I did, you probably didn't like the idea at first, did you?
No, I didn't. I loved the logo. I loved what they did. I just didn't want my name on there. I thought by putting your name on there, people would be like, why the hell would I wear this with this name on it? But they were right. People won't buy the shirt unless it has my name on it now.
I love it. So my older sweaters don't. So I'm gonna come over later on with a little Sharpie, and you can sign them. And you can go from there. So interesting stuff. You know, I'm gonna ask one last question because I love where that went. Aaron, I'm gonna go to you on this. Where have you failed?
Ooh. Geez, how long do you have?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, geez. I think, you know, like in life in general or with branding?
Well, I would say career-wise, we can.
Yeah. I think, you know, definitely everything that you guys have touched on today. I think one of the big things is just kind of having confidence in your own creative voice and understanding that, you know, when you first start out as an entrepreneur, you think that everyone around you has the answers and everyone has been doing this for so much longer than you, so they must be the authority on it. But I think there's something to be said for really, you know, trusting your instincts. If you think you can offer something to the industry, then more than likely you probably can. So I would say where I failed would be, or where we've maybe collectively failed as the studio is, you know, just trusting ourselves a little more and really pushing for those solutions that we think really would help benefit the client and kind of staying true to it as opposed to rolling over and saying, oh, okay, sure, you don't want to do it, no problem.
So where's the line there though, Aaron? I mean, if I'm a business owner and I'm a stubborn business owner and I have a vision and I have a real emotional attachment to my brand and my company, at what point do you push me to see things maybe differently? At what point do you go and say, okay, well, the customer's always right?
I think when it starts getting a little heated, quite frankly, like, you know, there'll be certain times where we go back and forth and we try so many iterations. And often it means, you know, we're losing money because we're spending the extra hours just desperately trying to convince that client that this might be the way to go. With great clients, we've done little tests. So, you know, as Kevin was referring to before, you know, the numbers actually allow you to test. Oh, can you guys still hear me?
Yep.
It's telling me my internet connection is going in and out. Sorry. Yeah, allowing you to test, allowing you to try ideas, different types of creative, going back and forth. We live in a digital age now where you can say, tell you what, how about you spend just $50 and we'll see how this does out in the digital world. And often it returns results that are very in line with what we're suggesting. And so those numbers do help convince those more stubborn clients to give it a shot.
Interesting. Kevin, how about, you know, I really like what you said there about the convincing part. Kevin, how about you on sort of on the corporate side? Do you know, I'll get to mistakes you've made in the past in a second, but you know, do you have a tough job internally at IKEA convincing the powers that be on where to go?
How much time do you have?
Yeah, exactly.
I almost feel like you're a second session. Yeah.
Yeah. It's been a while, yes, and I'm gonna go back to it, and this is somewhat for you, Ryan, but it actually does answer the question. I'm a huge proponent of the Agile methodology. I'm a certified Scrum Master in what feels like a different life. I was a developer. I led web development teams. So I'm a huge proponent of the fail fast and learn from it. So when I'm trying to convince the powers that be, as you said, that, hey, we're going to try this, that's usually my opening argument. To Aaron's point, you can try something really small. This is only going to cost you $50. Let's try something really small. If it works, expand it out. If it doesn't work, evaluate what went wrong. But failing fast and having the courage to say, listen, this might blow up in our faces, but I'm going to give it a go and just see what happens. And then in 3 months, evaluate, that really went sideways. What did everyone learn? All right, cool. And just having the courage to be able to do that is really a culture, and it's having the courage to do it in this setting. It's not an easy thing, but in this world, especially COVID, it's a necessity.
It's funny, Kevin. You and I are friends, but we're also from very different backgrounds as far as our careers go. And one of the hardest things for me has been listening to people like you tell me that something's going to get better, because I see it on a metric side, on a numbers side. And my dad in his business career, he taught me one thing. And he said, just because it is the way it is, doesn't mean it has to stay that way. And that was a big change for me for a long time, to go and say, no, I'm good. I'm doing well. The business is progressing the way it has to be. I don't want to rock the boat and change it. And that's, two of you on here are also business owners. You know exactly what that's like. It's nice to go to bed at night knowing that you're okay. But can you get better? I don't know, but I'm okay. And that's a real test sometimes. It really is. Especially, Aaron, in your case presently, when you're testing different waters and you're taking those chances. And as a business owner, that's hard. But as someone that's creative, Kevin, like you, that's a tough pitch to someone like me to go and say, convince me that it's going to be different when right now I think we're okay. And that's tough. That really is. So
Aaron's point, just sorry to jump in, but to Aaron's point, start small. I mean, as a business owner, from Aaron, who's working with clients every day, turning around to somebody who's just okay and saying, I understand that you're okay, but if we tried this, maybe you can, it's not asking for thousands of dollars, maybe $50, and we'll see where this goes. And just, again, I fully recognize, can you hear the hesitation in my voice? Convincing, to your point, trying to convince people that, hey, if we fail fast and learn from this, it's better for us in the long run, is always an uphill battle. So I always hesitate when I have this conversation and preface it with, okay, we're not going to put all our skin in this game, but we can try it.
But Kevin, I think as a business leader, one of the hard things from my perspective we have to do is actually trust that we're not the experts in everything too. And trust that you know what, we hire you because of who you are. And you're always right till you're wrong. And that's something that I sort of live by with our team as well, is to go and say, hey, let's try it. I'm by no means do I have the answers. And that's something that I think, as a business leader that doesn't have that creative side, Kev, it's really hard. It's really hard to go and say, oh boy, we're going to take that chance. And Aaron, I'm sure in a lot of your experiences with some of the airports and some of the restaurants you've done, and even your past life in the clothing brands, those are hard conversations to have too, but they're necessary ones. They really, really are. So it's interesting. Max, I'll sort of ask you the last question here, and I'll turn to some of the questions we've got from our group. Where have you failed, and what would you have done better or different?
Oh man, I know exactly where I failed. Building too fast without the proper infrastructure. So it's basically, I was trying to build this hotel without the proper foundation. And once you get near the top, the whole thing starts wobbling. So yeah, I think I just needed to slow down, kind of make sure I had the proper infrastructure and plan in place, and then build from there.
Would you have called, Max, would you have called yourself a business expert when you launched your brand?
Absolutely not.
It's interesting. I set you right up there, didn't I? Because I knew the answer, and it was almost one of those tee up, journalist questions. But one of the things that we find on our side is you've got a lot of people who are passionate, who love what they do, who are experts at what they do, but business sense wise, that's sort of an aside. How do I take the legal side, the accounting side, the growth side? And so they almost do it without that expertise. And, your passion only takes you so far. And what happens when they struggle, they don't want to have those difficult conversations with themselves. So they go right back to what they're comfortable with, which might be the creative side or the marketing side at the expense of good business practices too, though, don't they?
My problem is I'm fearless. So whenever I start to struggle, instead of taking a step back, I double down. And sometimes doubling down is not the right move. So I think for me, it's being able to take a step back, reevaluate what's going on. How can we correct the ship? Like if the ship's not going the way it's supposed to be going, and then putting together a new plan and going off in that direction.
It's funny, Max. I'd like to invite you to a couple of our poker games because I think it'd be a lot of fun. The way you like to sort of double down. I think the tells would be fantastic because you can't stop smiling either. So I think it would actually be great, right?
That's exactly why I don't play poker.
And that's exactly why I wish you would. Anyway, so we'll sort of take. We've got 2 audience questions that have come to us and a couple other ones too. One of the questions that I really like here is as follows. We've got a couple of people who have asked us about themselves and their career. So, as you could probably identify with this, we've got a lot of students right now that are going to be watching these sessions. Getting into the business that you're at right now, what could you offer them as sort of career advice? How do they market themselves? What would you wish that they would come to you if you were someone that might look to hire them?
Is this where I tell my osmologist story?
Yes.
Okay.
The trademark.
Okay. If I would have known what I know now, I won't say how many years ago when I was out of university or college, stand out. And whatever way that means, have a way to stand out. Whether it's for me, it was my personality. I need to room. So at the time I decided I need to stand out on a stack of resumes. And the way I did that is I gave myself a degree in osmology. So it's rightfully so, but it got me to the top of the stack. It literally said Kevin Gamble, osmologist, at the very top of my resume. I may have taken it a little too far. It's also plastered on the back of my car. But nonetheless, my advice would be stand out. And whether that is, for me, it was my personality, but if you're not the extrovert that I am, then find a way to stand out through your skills. So if you're applying to, I was a web developer, so I'm going to go with that. If you're applying to a web development job and the criteria is, programming language 1, 2, 3, well, make sure you know all 3, or at least can speak intelligently to them. And if you don't know the 3, then add a 4th and stand out in that way to say, hey, here's who I am. I am willing to learn fast, and just put yourself out there and try and stand out in whatever way you can, because getting a job or starting a career out of university is always an uphill battle because you're not the only one looking. So find a way to stand out. That would be my advice.
Interesting. And I remember when Kevin first launched the Osmologist brand, I remember thinking how crazy and how cool it was all at the same time. So until I saw the trademark, and then I thought, well, I can't use it. So I guess I don't like it. So Aaron, how about you?
Ooh, I think my advice would be network, like make as many connections as you possibly can. Some of the best advice that I was given towards the end of university was to, email my dream firms, email the agencies I wanted to look at, and just ask them for an informational interview. You're not asking for a job, and these people are very busy, so you're not asking for more than 15 minutes of their time, but just go in there with your portfolio, just practice speaking to people professionally, practice, conveying your own personal brand, what your interests are, what helps you stand out, to Kevin's point, and just make these connections, because I've been shocked at how many of these connections I kind of made through these little, informational interviews that I did at the university that have actually become really long-lasting industry connections that have led to different opportunities and different jobs. And then certainly being a part of, the Hamilton scene, it's got to be one of the most collaborative communities I think I've ever worked in. Everyone is, so supportive of new business ideas, new ventures. Everyone just really wants to connect and help in any way they can. So I would say it's never too early to start doing that, even as a student.
Yep.
Interesting. I'll echo the Hamilton side, because as someone who's worked here and had businesses here, and it's changed a lot, Aaron. It used to be very proprietary and very, very keep it close to your vest and don't tell anyone what you're working on. And now it's a community. It's a community of inventors. It's a community of creators, and it's something that we're better off for, because I think the city will grow in kind with that too. It really will. Interesting stuff. Max, how about you? Any advice for the future guerrilla marketers that you may have out there that you may want to talk to?
Absolutely. Do your research. I do a lot of acting in my spare time, and one of the key things I've learned through that is find out who your audience is. Like, if I'm going to audition for a part, I'm going to go find out who the director is, go look at what kind of work he's done in the past, so I know what he's looking for in an actor in a role, so that when I'm put in front of him, I know what he's looking for, like what he likes. So do your research. Don't just show up and just think, oh, everything's going to be gravy. Like, do your research, find out who they are, what they want, what they like, and then that way you're kind of one step ahead.
Really.
And Max, as someone who does a lot of the hiring, I'll echo two things of that. Number one, there's nothing, for the students out there. I'd like to know that you know about us as you walk in the door, because it shows you care, and you're not one of 100 resumes and 100 interviews that you're going to. Tell me why. And the next thing I'd say to piggyback on you is put yourself in the place of me. Give me solutions to my problems. Walk in and know what my pain points are and say why you can fix it. And then all of a sudden, I need to hire you. I don't get to choose to hire you. And this is something that I know I've sort of I've tried to learn on both sides of the table, I suppose. So interesting stuff.
The number one movie last year was Queen's Gambit. And I think the reason that resonated with people is she was always a couple of steps ahead. So my thing is, try to be a couple of steps ahead. You don't want to be caught by surprise by a question or anything else. You want to already have the answer when you get in there.
Yeah.
Cool.
I mean, if I was going to interview with Max, to Max's point, I know Max is a proud Hamiltonian. I think I know Max's personality. So I would walk in and, what are you looking for, Max? How can I help? And be that person. So to your point, Max, like, research the company that you're applying to, whether a company, university, program, whatever it is. Know what you're walking into, because an interview is a two-way street. You're also interviewing them, not just interviewing you.
Yeah. And that's something that I think for students is really hard to grasp, because you got out of college and you need a job. Yep. You need a job, and so you almost want to go and say yes, and it really is it's a blind date in a lot of ways, isn't it? It really is declaring that mutual interest, and that's something that I think college students struggle with, getting the first opportunity that comes to their mind, because they have to pay bills and they want to start their career. Sometimes it's okay to say no and to really go and say, no, I'm not a good fit for that role as well. So I'll last question, and I'll sort of, ask for quick 30-second answers on this. Aaron, I'll start with you. Where's your business going to be in 2 years?
Oh, great question. I think doing a lot of the same work that we love right now, perhaps with some larger clients and a slightly larger team, and God willing, maybe an office somewhere else in the world.
So you're going to leave Hamilton. You tell us all how much you love the city, and now you're going to leave.
Second office.
Okay. All right. Good point.
It's somewhere tropical. Can I volunteer to open that office for you?
Yes, 100%. You could be our web guy. You're hired.
I hear that was nice.
Ladies and gentlemen, you just watched the first live interview of Marketing Yourself. Kevin, how about IKEA?
All in on digital. I think, to what I said earlier, dragging the behemoth that IKEA is worldwide into the 21st century and doing it in a really, really fast way. I think we've done a good job over the last year because of the circumstances we were in to really push the digitization of IKEA. And I think as the digital portfolio and deployment manager, I can see what's coming down the pipe, 6 months in advance, and there's a lot of stuff to do. So I think really pushing our digital boundaries, especially given the size that we are. So that's us in 2 years.
And that's a great lesson for us as far as proactive goes, and taking a look at where an industry is going to be, and not reacting a year from now, but being proactive now and building towards something too. And that's, no one could have ever planned for this. I think I told the story, Max, last time we talked. I was on a panel with some European businesses, and the one guy went and said, well, I don't know why these businesses didn't do very well with COVID. They weren't prepared. And I remember I said to the person, I said, you can't prepare for the apocalypse. You just don't know. But we can be better prepared next time now that we've gone through it. And that's something that, good businesses don't just react. They are proactive with something that they can do afterwards. So that's interesting. Max, how about from your world? Talk to our students a little bit about where you may be in a couple of years.
This is going to sound a little backwards, but 2 years from now, I would like to be where I was 2 years ago. I feel like we were like peaking 2 years ago, and then COVID and everything kind of like really like put the brakes on it. So I'm trying to get back to where we were and then build from there.
But that's a smart business move, though. I mean, and I'll put on my hat in this for a second. To recognize that, and it's a bitter pill, is really important, also, isn't it? To not just go and say, no, we're fine, and keep going, because you go further down that rabbit hole too, don't you?
Yeah.
Interesting. Well, listen, Kevin, Max, Aaron, I really appreciate your time, and I've really enjoyed kind of connecting with you on a professional level as well, and this is an area that I don't have a lot of knowledge or expertise and experience in. So it's been great to learn from all of you, tie that into the entrepreneurial side as well. And I really hope that you'd be willing to come back and talk to us further again, because it's been absolutely fantastic.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. It was great.
All right.
Anytime.
Perfect.
Yeah, thanks. Great.
No, thanks so much to you, and thanks for all of us for joining, and hope you're enjoying Mindshift right now, and we'll talk to everybody soon.
Right.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.